third common manifestation of self, as we said yesterday, will be the harms that we do to other people. All selfish, self-centered human beings always operate in such a manner that they continually hurt other human beings. And it seems as though for we humans, the fastest, easiest way that we hurt another human being is usually in the sexual area in some way. Because you see, sex for we human beings is a little different than it is for the other species on the face of the earth. When it's time for the other species to have sex, it's purely for the purpose of reproduction, and God makes a decision as to when they are to have sex. He determines the time of the month, the time of the year, etc. God determines who they're going to do sex with. They don't have any choice in the matter. God determines how many times they're going to do it. He determines what position they're going to do it in. They don't think about sex before they do it. They don't think about sex while they're doing it, and they don't think about sex after they're through with it. For them, it is purely all at God's direction for reproduction of their particular species. You see, they don't have self-will, and they're not allowed to think about it and make decisions and make choices about it. Therefore, the other species very seldom become emotionally involved in sex. I have never seen a cow on a psychiatrist's couch talking about sexual dysfunction. They just don't have those kind of problems. But God made us different. He gave us self-will. He gave us the ability to reason. He gave us the ability to make choices. And because of that, we seem to become emotionally involved with other people when it comes to sex. And it seems as though we hurt people faster that way than we do any other way, not so much physically, but emotionally. Because you see, you and I have the opportunity and the ability to decide when we're going to do sex. Hell, we can do it anytime we want to, day, night, any day of the month, any day of the year. It doesn't make any difference. We can decide who we're going to do it with. And we can make choices as to whether we're going to do it with one individual, two individuals, three individuals, whatever we want to do. We could even decide how many times we're going to do it as long as we're physically capable of doing so. Why, we can even decide what position we're going to do it in. You know, tell me there's something like 64 different positions that we human beings can have sex in. I have no idea what they are. I only found 3. That's all I could ever find. 2 of those damn near killed me. So I think there's where we run into trouble in the sexual area, not so much physically, but emotionally, mentally, in the way we think about it and react to it. So what my book is going to do is give me a way to kind of review this thing and maybe let me see what sex has been doing to me or what I've been doing to other people with it, and then perhaps shape a new sexual life for the future where I don't have to hurt people. Because you know, if I continue to hurt people, then surely they're going to continue to retaliate, and that's going to block me off from God. And even if they don't find out what I've been doing to them, if God dwells within me, I've got to feel some shame, guilt, and remorse, and that's going to block me off from God. So it's not really going to be a question of what's right and wrong. It's going to be a question of what I have been doing with sex and what I perhaps should start doing with sex in the future. Now, we believe that God really intended for sex to be used for probably 2 purposes. One, for enjoyment. Certainly He made it enjoyable so we would do so. If we didn't have sex, we wouldn't reproduce. And as we said before, the amount of work involved in sex is so tremendous that I doubt if we would do it if there was not some reward, some form of enjoyment for doing so. So God intended for it to be pleasurable. But He also intended for it to be used to reproduce ourselves. And if we're using sex for reasons other than that, then perhaps we're using it for the wrong reason, if we're using it for purposes other than enjoyment or reproduce. Let's see what he says about it. Now about sex. Many of us needed an overhauling there. Now, you older fellas, don't get your hopes up. We're dealing with mental sex, not physical. But above all, we try to be sensible on this question. It's so easy to get way off the track. Here we find human opinions running to extremes, absurd extremes perhaps. One set of voices cry that sex is a lust of our lower nature, a base necessity of procreation. And you and I have heard those voices all of our life. They're the ones that say sex is a dirty thing. You ought to do it at one time in one position with one person only. And the only reason to do it is to reproduce yourself, and to enjoy it is a sinful thing. I've heard them over and over and over all my life. Then we have the voices who cry for sex and more sex, who bewail the institution of marriage, who think that most of the troubles of the race are traceable to sex causes. They think we do not have enough of it, or that it isn't the right kind. They see its significance everywhere. And we hear those voices today. Now, they're the ones that say you ought to be able to do sex anytime you want to, anywhere you want to, with anybody you want to, as many times as you want to, and you ought to enjoy it every time, and if you don't, there must be something wrong with you. Now, I think today they would call that the sexual revolution. Main thing I see wrong with that, it happened 25 years too late for me to participate in it. I'm not sure I could stand that today. One school would allow man no flavor for his fare, and the other would have us all on a straight pepper diet. Well, we want to stay out of this controversy. We do not want to be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. We all have sex problems. We'd hardly be human if we didn't. What can we do about them? And I read that with great relief, because I knew this book was getting ready to condemn me for what I had been in the past, and I knew it was getting ready to tell me what I was going to have to do in the future, and I'd already made up my mind that I wasn't going to pay a damn bit of attention to it. And I'm real glad to find out they're not going to get into that issue, period. You know, we're not dealing with what you might call sexual morals or morality. We're not going to try to tell anybody what kind of sex life they ought to have. And one of the major reasons for that is because our book is designed to help any alcoholic anywhere in the world, period. And if we start drawing sexual lines and start telling people what they can and can't do, then surely we're going to begin to alienate people. Because what's accepted in one area of the country may not be sexually acceptable in another area of the country. And what's acceptable in one country may not be acceptable in another country. So the book's not going to make a moral issue out of it, period. What it is going to do is give me a way to look at my own past sex life. And let me see if I've been hurting people with it. And let me see if maybe there isn't a better way to do some of that stuff. And maybe let me get a handle on this sexual thing so I can live with it with some peace of mind and serenity and happiness. He said, we reviewed our own conduct over the years past. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? Whom had we hurt? Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Where were we at fault? What should we have done instead? We got this all down on paper and looked at it. Now here's basically the same set of instructions. To look at our sexual past as we had to look at resentments and fears. The little sheet of paper we've made simply says in column 1, who did I hurt? Who did I harm? And most of us in some way or other have harmed or hurt other people in the sexual area. You know, many ways we do that. For instance, if we're in a relationship with another human being, and we go outside of that relationship and have sex out there somewhere, and my wife finds out about that, then surely I've hurt my spouse. If there's children in my home and it creates a problem there, then surely I've hurt my children. If the lady I had sex with outside of marriage, if it becomes public knowledge, then surely I've hurt her. And if she has a husband and children, and it creates a problem there, then I've hurt them also. With one sex act, I can hurt many, many people. Sometimes we hurt people in the sexual area simply by demanding more than our fair share. Maybe they don't want to do it quite as much as we want to. And maybe rather than considering their needs and wants, we selfishly demand that they have sex with us when they don't want to. Surely we're creating some emotional problems for them when we do so. Sometimes we hurt people in the sexual area by demanding they do sex with us in ways they don't want to. Maybe we found a particular way to do so that we find very pleasurable, but for them it's not. And rather than consider their needs and wants, we selfishly demand that they do things with us they really don't want to do. And maybe we hurt them physically that way, and surely we hurt them emotionally. Sometimes we hurt people in the sexual area by withholding sex. Maybe we've become rather callous and cold, and rather than consider what our partner wants, rather than give the fair share, we simply withhold sex from them. And surely we create an emotional problem for them. Nearly all of us in some form or other have hurt another human being in the sexual area. Sometimes we do it simply by creating jealousy and suspicion. Well, maybe our partner's not paying attention to us. We say, well, we'll show them, and we'll get involved in a casual flirtation with somebody else in order to create some jealousy. And sometimes we carry that a little bit too far, and we end up hurting 2 or 3 people when we really didn't intend to hurt them at all. I think all of us know what we have done in the past that has hurt another human being in the sexual area. We simply make a list of those names. Column 2, what did I do? Did I commit adultery? Did I force them to have sex when they didn't want to? Did I force them to do it in a way they didn't want to? Column 1 and 2 are very easy to handle. Column 3, what part of self caused me to do this? Now you would think if I hurt anybody in the sexual area, it would be caused by the sex instinct. And probably once in a while that's true. Sometimes in order to get the sexual release and gratification that comes from completion of the sex act, I may be doing it at the wrong time, in the wrong way, with the wrong person because of the sex instinct. But I think we're going to find that in most cases, it's caused by one of the other 2 basic instincts of life. For instance, as young boys growing up, we fellas learned at a very early age that you can use sex to build your self-esteem. After all, the more members of the opposite sex you can attract to yourself, the greater man you really are. Now, we call that John Wayneism. I don't know what you girls called it, but many of you tell me you use sex for the same purposes. That you found that if you could attract more members of the opposite sex, you could build your self-esteem and really make yourself feel better about yourself. Now, if that's what we're doing with sex, we're not doing it there to enjoy nor to reproduce, but we're using it to build our self-esteem, which falls under the social instinct. Sometimes we use sex to buy a personal relationship. Maybe we're just lonesome. Maybe we just want somebody to pay attention to us. And we found a long time ago we can give sex to buy back a personal relationship. Now, that's not using sex to enjoy or to reproduce, but it's to fulfill the social instinct and to fulfill emotional security. Well, sometimes we use sex to buy material security with it. Now, maybe we're in a situation we'd really rather not even be in. But we found out a long time ago that we've become so overly dependent upon the other human being for our material security, we give sex to buy back material security. Not to enjoy or to reproduce, but to fulfill the security instinct. Sometimes we use sex to get even with another human being. Yeah, our partner's gone out and done something they shouldn't do, and we find out about it, and it infuriates the hell out of us, and we say, we'll show them, and we'll go out and do the same thing. The fallacy in it is, after we've done it, we can't afford to tell them we did. But there, we didn't use sex to enjoy or reproduce. We used it to get even with another human being. Sometimes we use sex to force our will on another human being. Yeah, they're not doing what we think they ought to do, and we say we'll show them, and we'll just cut them off at the pass, and we won't let them have any until they come around to our way of thinking. Now, we boys aren't too good at that. We only last 2 or 3 days. But you girls have honed it to perfection. You know exactly how to do that. And I don't blame you. I'd do it too if it worked that good for me. You see, we're not making a list of dirty, filthy, nasty things. We're simply looking at our past sex life and trying to see what we've been doing with it. And I think to our amazement, we're going to find that we've been using sex for damn near everything except what God really wanted it used for, to enjoy and to reproduce. 2 things happened to me almost automatically. First, when I saw what I was really doing with sex, when I saw that I was using it to build self-esteem, to buy personal relationships, to get even with people, a lot of the guilt began to disappear. You see, I thought I was just a dirty, filthy old man, but I found out that isn't true at all. I'm a sick human being. And I use sex as all human beings use sex for purposes other than God intended, not because I'm bad, but because I'm sick emotionally. And when I realized that, a lot of that guilt began to disappear. Another thing that happened when I began to see what I've been using sex for, hell, it became absolutely ridiculous to me. And the desire to go do those things at the wrong time in the wrong place with the wrong people became less and less and less. And it allowed me to start getting a handle on this thing and start living with it with some peace of mind. You see, I always thought I was oversexed. No, I wasn't oversexed. I was undersecure. And I used sex to build my security, to build my self-esteem. And when I saw what I was doing with it, I thought, well, now that's stupid as hell. And that allowed me to begin to look at sex from an entirely different angle. Column 4, what's the exact nature of the wrong? The wrong is the harm I've done to another human being. That's what blocks me off, fear, guilt, remorse, etc. But what's the nature of it? Well, if I wasn't so selfish, I wouldn't be doing some of those things in the first place. If I wasn't so dishonest, I wouldn't be sneaking around behind my wife's back and doing those things. If I wasn't so frightened, afraid I was getting close to 40 years old, and if I'm ever going to get into that inn, I better get out there and get it done before it's too late, I wouldn't have been doing that in the first place. If I would have considered my wife and my children, I probably wouldn't have been out doing those things I was doing, and I wouldn't have ended up hurting those people. But you can bet your boots, if I stay selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate, I'm going to keep right on doing the same old things, hurting people. They're going to retaliate against me. That's going to create pain and suffering for me, guilt, remorse, resentment, and a whole ball of wax. And sooner or later, it causes me to go back to drinking. Now, it's not a question of whether I want to look at this sex thing or not. It's not a question of whether I want to change it or not. It's a question of, can I live with it like I have been in the past and stay sober at the same time? And I find for most of us, we usually have difficulties in that area. If we've been very careful about this, we have accomplished a lot of information. We're taking step 4 as we are looking at the harms from the past. In the 4th column, we have the exact nature of the wrong we're going to talk about to another human being. We have those character defects we're going to be ready to get rid of in 6. We're going to ask God to take away in 7. And in column 1, we naturally have a list of people we have harmed that will come off of this list for 8 and 9 in the future. Again, I'm amazed at the same names that keep popping up on all 3 sheets. My wife was on all 3. I resented her, I feared her, and I surely hurt her in this sexual area. I even had the Internal Revenue Service on all 3 sheets. I resented them and I feared them and I gave them a damn good screwing before I got through that. I better quit saying that. One of these days they're going to come after me just sure as anything. In this way, we tried to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. We subjected each relation to this test. Was it selfish or not? You know, that's the key thing. The book doesn't care how you do sex. If you want to do sex hanging upside down from a tree limb by your toenails, that's fine with the book. But if you force another human being to have sex with you, hanging upside down from a tree limb by their toenails when they don't want to, that's probably purely for selfish reasons. We ask God to mold our ideals to help us to live up to them. We remembered always that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised or loathed. Joe?
Okay, and we can see prayer. We have several prayers in the sexual area. Whatever our ideas turn out to be, we must be willing to grow toward it. We must be willing to make amends where we have done harm, provided we do not bring about still more harm in so doing. And we can see a reference there to step 9, when to do so would injure them or others. We want these people on our list, though, even though we might not be able to make that amend. In other words, we treat sex with any other problem. In meditation, we ask God what we should do in each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it. You know, this is, if we'll be mindful and look at that, I know I did. I have never been in a sexual situation that was wrong, and I look back through my life that I didn't know it was wrong. So I've always had that judgment within me. I never used it maybe, right? But it's always been there. It's been covered up, but it's always been there. God alone can judge our sex situation. Counsel with other persons is often desirable, but we let God be the final judge. We realize that some people are fanatical about sex, others are loose. We avoid hysteria, thinking, or advice. And here's another area I don't think that many of us really look at. And the book says that we avoid advice in this subject. You know, it's one thing that you can do around AA. If you talk to enough people, you can get a bunch of them to agree with you. That's right. If you go around AA, you can get enough. And it says we avoid advice, particularly in this area, and we let God be the final judge. I hear a lot of sexual advice around AA that we give to each other, and we shouldn't do that. So let God, how are we going to ever grow spiritually if we listen to ourselves? We'll already know. Use that. So suppose we fall short of the chosen idea and stumble. Does this mean we're going to get drunk? Some people tell us so. This is only half true. It depends upon our motives. If we are sorry for what we have done and have an honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we've forgiven and learned our lesson. We may make mistakes with this. But if we are not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we are quite sure to drink. We are not theorizing. These are facts of our experience. Okay, now, the key thing is, if anything that we're about to do in any area, if it's going to hurt another person, that indicates that it's wrong for us. Do something about sex, we earnestly pray for the right ear, for guidance in these questionable situations, for sanity and for strength to do the right thing. If sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves hard into helping others. We think of their needs and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves and quiets the imperious urge when the yield would mean heartache. Now he gives us the ultimate weapon to escape from self. It seems like that when once one of us alcoholics gets involved with another alcoholic, we get so involved in his life that it takes us out of self. And that's an automatic thing that we can use on any problem in our lives. Work with, when everything else fails, work with another alcoholic. Sometimes God can't get into our lives until he catches us meddling with another drunk. You know, that's about the only way that he can get in.